नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Hare Krishna. So welcome to today's morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. We were discussing Canto 7, Chapter 2, entitled Hiranyakashipu, King of Demons. We are going to discuss text number 24. Kindly repeat. Evam guner brahmane manasya vikala puman nasya avika yati tat samanyatam bhadre yalingo lingavan iva. Evam guner brahmayane मनस्य विकलः पुमान् याति तत्सामान्यतां भद्रे ह्यलिङ्गो लिङ्गवान् इव. Will you repeat? एवं गुणैर्भ्राम्यमाणे मनस्य विकलः पुमान् याति तत्संयतां भद्रे ह्यलिङ्गो लिङ्गवान् इव. एवं गुणैर्भ्राम्यमाणे मनस्य विकलः पुमान् याति तत्साम्यतां भद्रे अलिङ्गो लिङ्गवान् इव. माताजी's. एवं गुणैर्भ्राम्यमाणे मनस्य विकलः पुमान् याति तत्संयतां भद्रे यलिङ्गो लिङ्गवान् इव. Okay, word to word meaning. Evam, in this way, gunehi, by the modes of material nature, bhramyamane, when shaken, manasi, the mind, avikalaha, changeless, puman, the living entity, yati, approaches, tat samyatam, the same condition of agitation as the mind. Bhadre, O my gentle mother, he, indeed, alingaha, without a subtle or gross body, lingavan, possessing a material body, eva, as if. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In the same way, O my gentle mother, when the mind is agitated by the movements of the modes of material nature, the living entity, although freed from all the different phases of the subtle and gross bodies, thinks that he has changed from one condition to another. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:84-13, यस्यात्म बुद्धि कुणपेति धातुके स्वधि कलत्रादिषु भौम ईज्यधि यत्तीर्थ बुद्धि सलिलेन करहिचित् जनेषु अभिज्ञेषु स एव गोखरः. A human being who identifies the body made of three elements as the self, who consider the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of his birth worshipable, and who goes to a place of pilgrimage simply to bathe rather than to meet men of transcendental knowledge there, is said to be considered like an cow or an ass. Although Hiranyakashipu was a great demon, he was not as foolish as the population of the modern world. Hiranyakashipu had clear knowledge of the spirit soul and the subtle and gross bodies. But now we are so degraded that everyone, including the exalted scientists, philosophers, and other leaders, is under the bodily conception of life, which is condemned in the Shastras. Sa eva go kharaha. Such persons are nothing but cows and asses. Hiranyakashipu advises his family members that although the gross body of his brother Hiranyaksha was dead, and they were aggrieved because of this, they should not lament for the great soul of Hiranyaksha, who has already attained his next destination. Atma, the spirit soul, is always unchanged. Avikalaha Puman. We are spirit souls, but when carried away by mental activities, manodharma, we suffer from so called material conditions of life. This generally happens to non devotees. Haro abhaktas kuto mahat gunaha. Non devotees may possess exalted material qualities, but because they are foolish, they have no good qualifications. The designations of the conditioned soul in the material world are decorations of the dead body. The conditioned soul has no information of the spirit and its exalted existence beyond the effect of the material condition. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुर्भ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा So, a quick warning before the class. If any of you still want to remain as devotees, please leave this hall immediately, because today I'm going to convince you in the philosophy of materialism and non-theism, right? Or even atheism. So if you want to protect your Shraddha, please go away from this place. If you still are daring, you can continue to sit in this class. So in this purport, Sri Prabhupada, there are two parts to this purport. So we'll try to understand two halves. In the first half, Sri Prabhupada, he talks about how this whole philosophy, the Gokara philosophy, to think that the body is all in all. So how this philosophy is so prevalent today. Even exalted scientists, philosophers, and other leaders are under this bodily conception of life, which is condemned in the Shastra. So we'll try to spend some time understanding how the atheistic philosophies, materialism, it is not a new concept. Even in the Vedic context also, they have been exalted personalities, exalted for them, not for general masses, like Charuvaka and and so on. There are few people like that who presented this philosophy where the body is all in all. So today we'll try to see what exactly are the arguments that this atheistic philosophers present, and how there is, if you actually listen to their arguments, you'll get convinced, right? So we'll try to understand what is the premise, on what basis do they make these arguments. So the first argument that perhaps I'm sure you also would have heard, the moment you talk about anything divine, the first argument that comes is, perhaps, what do you think is the first argument that comes? Have you seen God? Right? Because the pramana, that source of knowledge that they trust, is pratyaksha. Pratyaksha is the only ultimate pramana. What I see is what I believe. What my senses perceive is the only reality. while the Vedic schools of thought, they talk about two other pramanas. They talk about inference, they talk about the scriptural testimony. So they outright reject that. Right? For example, the very, very popular analogy given in the Vedas, that how, where there is smoke, there is, are you sure where there is smoke, there has to be fire? How do you know? Because this is an example given for inference. Right? Have you seen every single fire in this world? On what basis did you arrive at this conclusion? Right? Yes, Prabhu. Have you seen every single fire in this world? No. Then how can you say that where there is smoke, there is fire? Right? So clearly, inference fails. You cannot extend your concept of logic here. I didn't realize you all will get convinced so fast. You made my job so easy. Right? So then you should not be trust logical inference. Only what you see is what you should believe. Right? But then the Vedic scholars that time were a little more smarter than all of us put together. So they presented very nice counter arguments to the materialists. They would say, okay, we may not have seen every single fire all over the world, but at least there is something called as fireness, that is heat. Right? Fire has some heat. So whenever something hot or something like fire is brought near something, then smoke comes. So we just extend that anything that has fireness. I may not have to see every single fire, right? But moment I see they are of the same category, right? Then I can easily extend this logic. So then immediately Charvaka and his friends, they deny this whole concept of fire. What do you mean by fireness? Right? Are you saying that there is something other than the immediate object? For example, why is juice wet? First of all, is juice wet? Yes. Why is juice wet? Because because it is a dharma of water. The dharma of the liquidity is to be wet, right? No, there he immediately denies that there is nothing called as dharma that exists independent of that object. Basically, by saying that, you are saying there is something called as wetness that exists independent of the juice. It is just the nature or the swabhava of the juice to be wet. Everything in this world has its own nature. That's it. So why are you using words like some unseen things like dharma? There is some jalat tattva somewhere. There is some bhu tattva. There is earth. There is water. There is fire. Right? These tattvas. Right? What are you talking about? Some unseen things. Right? So can you see the water in juice? Can you isolate the waterness out of the juice? The moment you say jala, water or liquidity exists independent of the juice, then remove it and show me. Right? Can you have juice which is not liquid? Right? So clearly there is nothing independent of that object. Right? So don't, you're just using word jugglery to confuse ordinary people with your philosophical terms. Right? Therefore, there is nothing called as fireness. Therefore, you should not trust the principle of inference, right? So uh, then what about the words of the Vedas? Then says what Vedas? Vedas and all, they are just creation of greedy Brahmanas who give the promise of heaven and scare people by telling about hell. That's the only point of this. Vedas are just some creations of the privileged class of people. I hope you are able to resonate with this point, because these are the arguments that you see hearing heard around you, that it is just some creation by certain people to oppress certain other class of people, right? Because who has benefited most from Vedas? The Brahmanas. Don't you see the agenda here? Right? So somebody created a philosophy so that people give donations to them, and everybody is afraid of some suffering, even the unseen suffering. Suffering is such a big trauma for people. Even the unseen suffering, something called as hell, right? People are spending lakhs of rupees to do all these yagyas, and then he questions yagyas. What yagyas, man? Right? It's like saying, why? How do yagyas work? You are putting like one time when we do our yoga teachers training courses, right? So we used to start our courses by taking our students to our yagya. So one boy very sincerely he attended the entire yagya, everything, and at the end of the class, end of the whole yagya, he had a very sincere question. He said, "Everything is nice, but why are we starting the course with a barbecue? Because you're putting all the fruits and grains and dry fruits and sweet rice. Why are we doing that? Anybody knows why we do that? To satisfy Lord Vishnu. You are putting things in fire, you are burning, you are destroying things, and how is Vishnu getting satisfied? Vishnu likes destruction. Is he the master of Tamogun? Yes, Prabhu? It is offering to Agni Devata. You see all of them every day. Huh? That's what I'm asking. You saw all the 64 Devatas were standing there, right? Huh? Mentally you call them. You didn't see them, na? You tell me what you saw. Some mantras they're chanting. That same thing, na? And at the end of it, what do? They ask for dakshina, na? So don't you see the plan? Why are you being so naive? They're just interested in your dakshina, that's all. Right? They just chant some mantras and as right. But if they have to, how throwing that? For example, we do when somebody departs from this world, right? The brahmanas immediately come and they do some yajnas for the departed souls. Why do we do that? To deliver the soul. But where is the soul? No, but where is the soul if it exists? But the heart. So I'm saying the dead person. Where is the dead person's soul? Yeah, but where is it? Okay, but you mean to say it is somewhere around, right? Right. So then why are you offering all this ahuti in the yagya? Because the Vedas, the same Brahmanas, they say that because the soul is traveling right now on the way to Yamalok, right, to offer some food to the departed ancestors, we offer tarpans, the pindadan which is done. The pindadan whole concept is you are offering some food to that soul which is traveling in its afterlife, right? Have you heard this? Like some journey prasad. Very good. So from tomorrow, Prabhu, whenever you are traveling, we will not give you any food. We will sit here and do yagya. You eat there in the journey, right? So it does it work like that? When you are traveling, you pack all theplas and chunda and right nice laddus, dry fruit laddus. You pack for one full week and then you travel. And when a soul departs for the journey of the soul, so-called soul, we don't even know if it exists. You are saying that you sit here and offer donation to the brahmana and the soul there is enjoying food. Does it work like that? So okay, then what about, and this is the ultimate argument that the atheists like to provide, which is taking shelter of morality, right? For example, the same yajnas, why are you killing animals? But it's there in your Vedas, right? The same Vedas whose authority you are quoting, huh? So you mean to say Vedas are not universal, they are circumstantial, no? The animal will get a new body. Then why don't you kill your parents instead? Some elderly or grandparents, they'll get new body. This is the exact argument which Charvaka presents, that oh, very conveniently you are killing innocent animals in the promise that they will get new body. Why don't you kill your own grandfather? Right? You are saying it is good for the old body, then kill your grandfather. Pest. It's a win-win for everyone. Animals are also safe, and your grandfather is also safe because he'll get a young body. Body is body, na? So sacrifice a human being, it's okay. You'll get a younger body. You don't want, everybody wants younger body today. Right? So much of money is being spent to reverse the aging. So if you have the secret, just go. Put all the old people, start sacrificing them in yajna, and you will see in front of you, young bodies will start coming out. Right? So therefore, this whole process is one big scam run by these brahmanas. So they are only interested in your donation. Understood? Actually, there is nothing called all these things which you don't see, God, soul, karma, they don't exist, right? In fact, all that exists is just this physical body. So why are you, I mean, the moment you talk about moksha, what are you trying to liberate? But then, some some intelligent person in the audience may ask this question, okay, if you're saying body is all in all, then here are all the material elements. Can you create consciousness? Right? Because if you see, matter and consciousness have totally different properties, right? Because matter is non-sentient, consciousness is sentient, right? So how can you combine two, three things and then produce something that is totally different from any of its? You are saying that the sum is more than the individual products. Did you get my argument? Right? So it's like you are putting, you're taking dal, you're taking rice, you're adding sugar, right? Or let's say you're adding salt, right? So is water? What is the is water sweet? No. Is dal sweet? No. Is salt sweet? No. You put jeera, is it sweet? No. You put chili powder, is it sweet? No. You mix all these things and suddenly something sweet comes out. Pongal, some sweet pongal comes out. Right? So if something like this happens, then you're saying that the sum of individuals is more than the whole. The whole is more than the sum of individual parts. So then Charvak also presents an interesting argument. No, it is possible. Take pan ka patta, take betel nut, take some tuna. What is the color of pan ka patta? Green. What is the color of tuna? What is the color of the supari? Blackish, brown, yellow, depends on, right? If you combine all of them and chew, what color you get? Hence proved. So when sometimes when material things are combined, you will get a product which is totally different from its original. So therefore, even consciousness is just a product of matter. So you don't have to trust these Vedic people when they say, oh, there is something called as soul. Their only agenda is to empty your pockets because they want to create fear in your heart. Right? Actually, the only concern, if you see, you have is what the deepest concern. Why are we so attached to yagyas? Why are we attached to all the Vedic rituals? Because fear of what? Fear of sin, little more. Suffering. You want to avoid suffering. So let's address the problem here. Right? You don't have to listen to all this, unseen arguments and all that. There is suffering. And now the same Vedic scholars, what they say? Oh, in this material world, every time you enjoy, some suffering will come. Therefore, don't indulge your senses. Sense gratification leads to suffering. Right? Have you heard Vedic scholars speak like that? Right? It is just as foolish as saying because rice has husk, you reject rice completely. What will you do if some rice and husk is given to you? Right? When you grow rice in the field, it has husk, it has a covering over it. So what do? You remove the husk and eat the rice. So the goal of life is like that. Minimize the pain and maximize pleasure. You cannot completely avoid pain in this world. Pain is part of this world. Therefore, learn to embrace the sufferings and try to live a life in such a way that you minimize your pain, but the primary focus should be to maximize your pleasure. Therefore, whatever you do, whatever how you live, the goal of life is to maximize your pleasure. Right? Agreed? Prabhu, you are nodding your head. Was it a thoughtful nod or was it a nod in acceptance? Yes. Nobody told me this philosophy. Where was I all these days? Right? This will become atheist now? Okay. Right? So the only morality, therefore, even the, like for example, Vatsyayana, the famous Vatsyayana who wrote the Kama Sutra book, right? He is part of the same Charuvaka philosophy. So he also says, but to maximize this pleasure, sometimes you need to follow some discipline. Believe it or not, Vatsyayana talks about following brahmacharya. Why? Brahmacharya today will lead to greater pleasure tomorrow. So all the dharma that you follow is for the goal of increasing your karma. All the artha that you earn is to increase your pleasure. So he says dharma, artha and kama, these are the only three purusharthas. Dharma should lead to artha and artha should lead to kama. What moksha are you talking about? Moksha means to liberate. Whom are you liberating? There is no soul. What is there to liberate? Right? Therefore, the goal of life is to yavat jivet, sukham jivet. Whatever you live, enjoy life. Right? So this is the argument of this sa eva gokhara that Prabhupada talks about, who think that the body is all in all and there is nothing beyond it. Right? So, so if you see the arguments, they are very, very well structured. And the fundamental premise of this whole materialistic philosophy is in rejecting Anuman and Shabda, the scriptures and logic, right? And on that foundation, they have created. And if you actually carefully see all the popular, there's one very famous Acharya, self-proclaimed Acharya these days, very popular on social media, who literally quotes Charvak philosophy, right? And he's speaking on Gita and Vedas and scriptures, and there was a, and basically he's also a disciple of another old Charvaka, one Dadiwala spiritualist, right? So without taking any name, those who understood, understood. Right? Those who didn't understand, meet me off the mic. Right? Basically, he was inspired by this person's books, and now he has become very famous. And the common argument that you'll see is morality. Morality always becomes the basis of the ultimate brahmastra for every materialistic argument is morality, right? So this is where our Vedic acharyas, they have given so many. Now if I don't give you the counter arguments, you will not sleep peacefully tonight. So let's see why Hiranyakashipu is so advanced. In the second half of the purport, Prabhupada is glorifying Hiranyakashipu, that how he had such clear knowledge of spirit, soul, subtle body, gross body, right? In fact, later on also you will see when Hiranyakashipu is about to start his tapasya, how he motivates himself. The soul is eternal. Whatever spiritual advancement I gain in this lifetime, I will continue it in my next lifetime. So even if it requires me to take multiple lifetimes of effort, I will do this tapasya, please Brahma, and get this benediction. Right? He is more convinced about the eternality of the soul than we as devotees are. Right? And look at his conviction in the process of yajna. Right? We don't have faith in yajna, but Hiranyakashipu was so convinced. He spent all his manpower, because your conviction is where you spend your money. Simple. Right? Where you spend your resources is where you are convinced about. Right? So where did Hiranyakashipu spend all his resources? in destroying yagyas. That shows how much conviction he had in the process of yagya. If I want to disrupt the cosmic balance, if I want to affect the devatas, if I want to destroy Vishnu, the first thing I need to do is destroy yagyas, destroy all forms of spiritual activities, destroy the Brahminical culture. So Hiranyakashipu was so convinced about this, right? I wish we could develop that level of conviction. Our life would be at a totally different level, right? So definitely Hiranyakashipu was very, very advanced. And how do we then counter this argument? So we don't have to go too far. In the Jaina philosophy, there's a lot of counter arguments given to Charvaka, right? Yeah, though we don't take the Jain philosophy very seriously in terms of the theology aspect, right? But one very great Jain scholar, he presents one argument that, look, so if you are, on what basis are you accepting direct perception, right? Because even when you are making any argument now, you are inferring it based on the previous perception, right? So subtly you are also using inference. So he discredits, and then he also says that how, okay, if you are rejecting verbal testimony, you know, testimony of an authoritative person, then why should I listen to you? On what basis are you claiming yourself to be an authority if you yourself have rejected the word of any authority, right? And then Sripad Baldev Bhushan also, he wrote this very nice book called Tattva Deepika, in which he presents the, different arguments of different philosophers, and so in that he talks about the Lokayaktas, the Charvaka philosophy also. So he gives some very common arguments that we know today, which we use in all our DYS, all our journey of self-discovery classes. But he presents some beautiful arguments. He says that, okay, if you are saying that body is all in all, right, then how come as soon as a child is born, how does a child know that it is supposed to drink milk? It is such an instinctive thing that is programmed in the child, right? So basically he uses that argument to ask, where do our samskaras come from if life begins from the womb and ends in the tomb, right? If there's no continuity of past, present and future lifetimes, then how do you explain concept of samskaras? Instinctively we are driven by some things. Where is it coming from, right? And then he also says that if connection to the body, if consciousness is the body, then a child that is born from a parent is also an extension of the body. Then how is it that a child does not experience the pain of the parents? Not the mental pain, like you take a pin and prick a parent, right? Child is an extension of body. If body and consciousness are so strongly linked, right, then why is it that a child is not experiencing the pain, that the physical pain that the parent is going through, right? And then he questions, how is it that some people remember their past life? If there is no concept of past life, then how is it that some people remember that, right? And then he says that all said and done, if some announcement comes, there is free food being distributed somewhere, all you lokayaktas will go run to the river to eat free food. Why are you trusting the words of people? If you reject verbal testimony in your practical day-to-day life, you yourself are following, but when it comes to philosophy, you are rejecting it. So these double standards, right, Baldev Bhushan he exposes, right, and he presents that how we need to rely on the verbal testimony of the scriptures. We need to rely on inference, right, logical inference. And therefore Hiranyakashipu now, based on that, he presents a beautiful Vedantic concept here, that how, if the consciousness, if the soul and body are different, then why is it that when the body or the mind, when they go through changes, when they go through suffering, the soul goes through suffering, right? First of all, does the soul go through suffering? Does the soul go through pleasure, right? When you when 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 you are walking in Vrindavan forest and some thorn pricks your foot, what do you experience? Pain. Who is experiencing this pain? Soul is experiencing the pain, right? But then the body is the one that got pricked. How is it the soul is experiencing that pain, right? To explain that strong connection between these two, Hiranyakashipu, Shripad Hiranyakashipu, he gives some beautiful examples here. That just like how in the previous verse, yesterday we saw this verse, that how when there is a reflection that you see in the water, like sometimes you'll see the reflection of the sun and the moon in water, and due to the wind, there are some tiny ripples that are created in the water, and it looks as if that the sun and the moon got distorted, right? But factually, did the sun and the moon get distorted? No, it is the reflection which gets distorted, right? So likewise, it is the mind which acts as the connection between the soul and the physical world, right? Think of mind to be like this mirror on which the images of the outside world gets transferred, and when the mirror gets distorted, you see the outer world as distorted, but actually the world didn't change, neither did you change. It is the mirror of the mind that is fluctuating or getting distorted. And that's what he points out in this verse, in today's verse. He says that how, what is causing this distortion, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 13th chapter, very beautifully, in text 21, Lord Krishna explains that how karya karana kritatve hetur prakriti uchyate. The karya and karana, the cause and effect of this world, all the transformations that you see around you, they are all a result of prakriti, the three gunas which are transforming, right? But then he says, Purusha sukha dukkhanam bhoktver hetu ruchate. The sukha dukkha, the cause for pain and pleasure is the Purusha or the soul, right? Just try to break down this. Let's try to unpack this statement. Very, very important statement. That the cause and effect, all the changes that you see around you in this world is a result of material nature. But pain and pleasure are created by the individual soul, right? So let's take a simple example for that. So is lauki sabzi good or bad? Lauki is bottle gourd. Is bottle gourd sabzi good or bad? How many of you say good? Raise your hand. How many of you say it's bad? Raise your hand. Okay, Prabhu doesn't like lauki. Very good. Right? So actually, lauki sabzi is lauki sabzi. You define it as good or bad, right? Your past tastes, your choices, your maybe you never tasted proper lauki sabzi. Whoever was cooking lauki sabzi for you were murdering the lauki. So perhaps that's your past impression. Therefore, you have an aversion to lauki. And somebody else might have been fortunate to have a good cook at home, and therefore they have tasted good version of lauki. So you see, the concept of pleasure and pain is something that is defined by the individual. The world in itself is just going through its natural course of transformations because of the agitation of the gunas. And that is what Hiranyakashipu is pointing out here, that the gunas, the movement of the modes of material nature, causes the mind to get agitated. So moment there is a change, like right now there's a change, there's some rajogun happening. Can you hear the rajogun? Right? And now somebody may get disturbed by this, right? But Sri Gauracharan Prabhu will be assured, all work is going on. Because for him, it is connected to his work. So his perception of the tractors moving and the JCB moving is different from us, right? So the concept of what is wrong, what is pleasure, what is pain, is something that is an experience coming from the identity of the Purusha. And this is the important part, the identity. Right now you are identifying with audience in Bhagavatam class. Therefore, anything that is disturbing this identity is a cause of pain. Anything that is going to support this identity, like these birds are so beautifully creating a nice ambience for us. So we'll say, oh, the birds are so good. right? But the moment this dog is barking and creating some disturbance to the sound, you will say, I didn't plan it, right? It just, the dog was participating in the class, adding value to the class, right? So the moment the dog creates some distortion, you will say, oh, you are challenging my identity as the enjoyer of this class or as a participant of this class. Therefore, the dog is bad, the birds are good, right? So it is the false identity of the soul that creates the concept of pleasure and pain, right? So therefore when Vedas talk about purifying the false ego, purifying the false identity, right, coming to the position of Jivara Swarupa Krishna Nityadas, coming to the constitutional position of the soul as eternal servant of the Supreme, coming to your true identity is ultimate solution for all miseries, right? So that's the basis of this. What is so interesting if you read this entire section of Bhagavatam is Hiranyakashipu knew all this better than many of the worldly people now, and even in the past. His knowledge of the Vedic scriptures is as good as any other Vedic scholar, and yet he did not have faith in the Supreme Lord. He did not have any devotional understanding, right? And this goes on to prove that how knowledge cannot create Shraddha. Knowledge can only protect Shraddha, but knowledge cannot create Shraddha. So many times, like recently I was talking to someone and this person said, Prabhu, can I give this person link to your online? He was living in a different city. So he was asking, can I give this person link to your online classes? This person is always, he used to attend some of our ISKCON classes, but something's happened, and this person is now constantly looking for counter arguments, blah blah blah. So can I send him to your class? I said, nothing's going to change about this person, because your very fundamental approach, you are thinking that knowledge can create Shraddha in this person. That very approach is wrong. And this is a mistake many times as people part of outreach, different preaching programs. We make this mistake. We think that knowledge can generate Shraddha in others. Right? Shraddha only comes through Mahat Kripa. Bhagavad Kripa, which is coming through Mahat Kripa. By the mercy of the great souls, Krishna's mercy comes to the mercy of the great souls, and that is the only way Shraddha or spiritual conviction is created. Right? Then one may question, then why are we sitting and listening to Bhagavatam classes every day? Why are we reading Prabhupada's books? What do you think? That is Mahat Kripa. Right? So, well, that's a Prabhupada many times he would say, what will your 1 hour of preaching do? Just give them my book in 1 minute. It all takes 1 minute to give person a book. Right? Why? Because you're just transferring Mahat Kripa to them, in bringing Mahat Kripa into their life. By appreciating the print, by appreciating the book quality, by, or appreciating the nice layout and font, even by that, the Bhakti Sukruti will begin. Right? So, Her Grace Mandakini Mataji, she was sharing this very inspiring pastime. I keep quoting it in many of my classes, that how our Ananta Shanti Prabhu, when he was preaching in Russia, he didn't have any facilities, no Sankirtan, no musical instruments, no book distribution. He couldn't even walk around in Vaishnav attire, right? So there's no way, no temples for sure. How did he spread Krishna consciousness? Because he was convinced in the fact of Bhagavad Kripa and Mahat Kripa. Every day in the morning, he used to go to a rose shop, buy a bunch of roses, offer it before Krishna and Prabhupada, and with prayers, he used to pray, Oh Krishna, oh Prabhupada, please kindly invest your mercy in these flowers. And by offering those flowers, he converted it into prasad, Krishna prasad. And he used to go around on the street distributing these flowers, saying, Please smell this rose. And just by smelling that rose and appreciating, wow, what a nice rose, there Krishna conscious life started. So easy, na? Preaching is so easy. We make it complicated, right? So, so that is why through our personal conduct, by when people come to this place, by maintaining cleanliness in this place, by creating nice facilities for these people, that is how you are creating Sukruti in people, right? If you understand the broad vision of Govardhan Eco Village is that, right? Our lectures are to later on, once the Shraddha begins, to to flame that spark and to keep it going and not get it doused, we have all these complicated classes, right? But the whole premise of how Shraddha begins, and also this is why the last point is here is that Hiranyakashipu, we cannot use this section of Bhagavatam to to address somebody going through grief, because while Hiranyakashipu's arguments are very shastric and logical, when a person is going through grief, they do not need logic, they need solace, right? And even the best of the logic, provided disconnected from the ultimate source of solace, is only going to enhance pain, right? So that's why if you see, even though he is going to quote later on the story of, the of Yamaraj coming at the story, blah blah blah, right? Extend if temporarily you may salve the situation, you may provide some temporary solace to a person going through grief, but ultimately, when a person is grieving, what are they grieving about? Two things: one, the departed soul, and two, the lost connection that they are having, the disruption, the connection they're having, the departed soul, right? So simply providing knowledge that, oh, soul first, one philosophy, soul is itself not there, why, what are you crying for, is complete violence. Another aspect is to say that how, you know body and soul are different, right? Like how Krishna dehi nosminyatha dehe, right? Krishna quotes that philosophy not to give solace to Arjuna that Bhishma, even if he dies, is going to get a young body. Don't worry. That's not the purpose why Krishna quoted that. In fact, to overcome that grief, what is the instruction Krishna gave? Tam titikshvasa bharata. Right? That seek from your spiritual connection, from your devotional connection, learn to seek strength in going through these difficulties in life. Right? When you accept the bigger plan of the Lord, that is when you start to find solace in difficult times. So until that higher connection is not there, it is not easy to find genuine relief. So the best we can do is, through whatever means, inspire that higher connection in people when they're going through grief, rather than giving a logic to dismiss their grief. By teaching philosophies of detachment and soul and body are different, you are invalidating their grief, you are dismissing their grief, you are saying it is, it's like you're gaslighting them, if you know that expression, right? So therefore you're not trying to dismiss their grief as invalid, but rather acknowledge that yes, this grief is real, but there are things beyond it. By learning to see the higher connection, that is how you can provide this. And that is the mood that when devotees are consoling in Bhagavatam, you will see that is the approach that they take. They always remember the Lord in their prayers, invoking that higher connection, like that. So these are a few thoughts which I wanted to share. Are there any quick questions, comments, any reflections before we end? All right, let's end here. Thank you all so much. A question? Yes, Prabhu.
A couple of questions. So one thing is, Roji, in the discussion about between materialism as well as the Vedic umbrella. So what is the sort of final conclusion? Because like generally we see that this sort of arguments, counter arguments keep going on. So that I just wanted to, because this is something that we generally encounter in regular discussions, be it these or some variations of these arguments.
So as we discussed, one immediate argument which all schools of philosophy they quote is explain the concept of swabhava and karma, right? Because this is something that is observable and tangible and we can experience. Like even reincarnation theory, how many past life regression case studies do we know? We don't even know all that. But one thing is for sure, if the body is purely a product of matter, two twins who share the same DNA, everything will have different swabhavas, right? So they often quote this concept of swabhava because the swabhava is coming from certain past life karma. Because the fact that there is some continuity, if something is continuous, there has to be a continuous experiencer or an observer, right? So who or what is that continuous unchanging observer? So when even when they say that, like this is Patanjali quoted in the Yoga Sutras also, he says that how when the Bauddhavadis they say that ultimately mind is the ultimate reality. What we call as soul, they call refer to as mind. There is no eternal soul. What reincarnates is just the mind. There's only subtle body that goes through reincarnation. There is no soul. Ultimately, it's all void. So there he presents the argument that okay, if you're saying mind is that source of consciousness, then who is observing the mind change, right? And another argument, even modern scientists are now slowly the whole field of consciousness studies. It's called the deep theory or something like that. I don't have the name. So basically, what they have found is that when a person goes to sleep, right? Technically all the neural activity of the body has stopped. Like even when you're having REM sleep, that little wakeful, so during that time there's some neural activity. But when you go to a state of deep sleep, there is no neural activity, and yet you remember that you slept. So who is remembering, who or what in you, which part of you is remembering that you went into a state of deep sleep? If you are that deep sleep, then you will not know the changes happening to you. So they explain that there is something beyond the mind also. There is some, that's where they're introducing the word consciousness. There is something conscious which is even observing the mind operate. So when it is the mind which goes into a state of deep sleep and the consciousness is observing it, right? So or to, if to kind of make it a little more simple, right? So let us say, uh, let's say somebody is writing this verse on the board, right? So Keshavan Prabhu writes the first line. So you come and see him writing the first line, right? So then you leave this room, and then a second person comes and he sees, oh, Keshavan Prabhu is writing the second line. So what is the conclusion of the other person? The first line is already there. Now Prabhu is writing second line. Then the second person leaves. Third person comes. Then he sees, oh, he's writing the third line. First and two have eternally been there, but Jayasachan Prabhu just sitting there and watching Keshavan Prabhu write all the four lines. So only when some unchanging person is present here who's observing all the changes, only then you will say that, oh, all these four lines have been written. So for the, likewise, if you think of the board as the mind, if the mind is going through its changes, who's an unchanging person observing the mental changes? And that is how soul or consciousness, its existence is used using inference, using logic. That's how they tried. This is a common theme across the different schools. And of course, then they establish the authenticity of the Shabda Pramana, and then they quote the Vedic references, which is a style which you'll see in many Prabhupada's purports. Right? That's the argument, standard argument. Yeah.
So that's what generally like in the Swabhava case also a lot of arguments that is also like even in the example of twins, right? That can also sort of be explained saying that that also rises out of some distinction or there is some random element involved. And the same is often also, so generally that's what when it comes to consciousness, then the question comes of sort of how we are defining each of these elements. And often like the devil is in the detail, there's a lot of jugglery that happens and finally uh, a lot of basically that is also sort of used to overthrow the theories that we put forward.
Well, bro, that's right. So this new research on the deep sleep state is now making the whole, even the scientific world, understand. Of course, they don't use the word soul yet,
Yes,
right? There is something beyond the mind. Right now, your nervous system is the only source of consciousness, is a popularly accepted theory. But now even scientific community is also waking up to the idea that it seems like there is some other missing element that we have not yet decoded, right? In fact, There's also a problem of integration in modern psychology also, where because today we know which part of the brain does which part of the function, right? So when you see, for example, let's say a mango falls on you and it splashes on the floor, and let's say some juice falls in your mouth, right? This is the whole scene. So what is happening? Your eyes are seeing the mango, your nose is smelling the mango, your ears heard the mango drop, your tongue has tasted the mango, and let's say you even touched the mango. So there are different parts of the brain that take care of each of these functions. But as of today, at least, we do not know who or what is integrating all of this and telling me that this is a mango. Which part of the brain this whole integration is happening, we don't know yet. It is just like how, if when there is a let's say security controller who's taking the feed from the different cameras, right? They see, oh, a car is entering from the main gate. Now the car has gone to this part, and somebody comes out of the car, right? So somebody who's distinct from the individual cameras is observing a input coming from multiple sources and concluded that, oh, this person has arrived. Which means for that to happen, the security guard is the integrator of all the inputs, right? So likewise, the different parts of the brain, how they are working, there has to be some integrator. So they just call it as a problem of integration, but we know that it is Paramatma who's allowing you to interpret all of that, and it's not even the soul, by the way. It's a Paramatma who's interpreting all of that, integrating all of that, and giving you as understanding to the soul, right? So like that. So there are slowly these things are coming up, but it will take some more time, I guess, to become more mainstream. Yeah.
One more quick question. So, as you're giving many examples of how, like, whatever we perceive depends on sort of our identification with it. So, ultimately, it's sort of, as the saying goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So, in the Vedic conception, like, is there some thing like absolute, like, in these cases, beauty is always relative, but is there also absolute beauty or absolute?
Very good. This is the question that the Vedantic scholars asked. All the truths that I deal with in this world are bound by time, space, or circumstance. Is there a truth independent of these three things? That is called Param Satya, or the absolute truth. So this is the question which should lead us to Krishna. When Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satyam Param Dhimahi, when Vyasa begins Bhagavatam, what is that Param Satya? Meditate on that Param Satya. This is the understanding. So therefore, the Vedic quest for quote unquote God is not just to find some guy who has nothing to do and therefore created the world and now put all the people in suffering. No, that's not the understanding. That is still a very modern, almost Abrahamic kind of thought process. The Vedic understanding of God is the absolute truth. That is why Prabhupada, in the introduction to Bhagavatam, first canto itself, he writes, the conception of God and the conception of absolute truth are not the same. Right, in introduction, the first statements of Bhagavatam, very important statement, because Bhagavatam is not talking about God. It is talking about Param Satya, or absolute truth. That is a quest for a Vedantic seeker. Right? So yes, so there is something, and that, so the relativity, when you say something is relative, it is with respect to something else which is unchanging. Right? Like when you give address to someone, you'll say, take a right turn near the buffalo. You'll not say that. Take a right turn near the mountain. Because the mountain is an unchanging pillar. Left and right is relative to the mountain, not to a moving buffalo. So that unchanging truth is the quest that a Vedantic scholar tries to understand. So that unchanging aspect is the absolute truth. Right? Okay, we'll end here. We can meet offline. Thank you so much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.